to our last speaker, Fiza Farhan, who's going to talk about Journey to Women's Economic Empowerment. Fiza, all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Turab, and thank you, all of you, for this wonderful session. So after Fauzia's very spectacular research-based, evidence-based presentation, my story from the heart might be a little boring, but maybe a good ending to this very exciting talk. So what I have for you guys is my story, my thoughts, and I don't have any facts to back it. We can do a research later on. But primarily what I have learned about women economic empowerment the hard way, or by doing or by getting in the field actually, because I was never, as Turab mentioned, I was a student in LUMS, International Trade and Economics, and then I went to Warwick to do my master's in business. I was a business student, and women economic empowerment or women empowerment or gender studies was never my main forte. It came out naturally, being a woman perhaps and just being passionate about the subject, and then it evolved for me representing Pakistan at a UN high-level panel for women economic empowerment. So the subject for me is not a matter of research or is not a matter of where I'm placed. It has evolved as I have evolved over the years. So hence it's now become very close to my heart and it's now my passion, but the passion has also evolved as things have materialized in my life. So my topic is going to be primarily the role of an individual in this whole fight for women economic empowerment, all this global challenge, I would say, of women economic empowerment. Why do I say that it's the role of an individual? And I'm going to start my story from there, whereby after graduating from LUMS or whatever, as an individual, as a young woman, I just found it in myself to fight for my own empowerment as being a woman, being a young woman graduating from LUMS, coming from a conventional family who wants to get you married off to a decent household and you don't have to work. So from that fight of women economic empowerment, which at that point was a personal fight and nothing to do with the global agenda of women economic empowerment, but started off as an individual. So this initial fire started off on an individual level, whereby I went against all my family norms to go to Warwick or to continue with my education before I could get married or before I could get settled down with a family. So, however, that initial fight as an individual later went on to becoming an organizational fight, then went on to becoming a global fight, now continuing at a government level and otherwise as well, and it continues to escalate. So I started off as a young woman and then launched my two companies, Baksh Foundation and Baksh Energy, back in 2007, both working on the challenge of not just women economic empowerment, but developing rural social development solutions, and women empowerment just came out to be an inevitable solution for them. So again, it came out naturally. And I like to share this with people because it's not that women economic empowerment is something we're looking to solve. It's that the actual solution is that whenever you identify problems in any rural context, women economic empowerment becomes the ultimate solution to all those problems. And we've realized this through the projects we launched in Baksh Foundation. So I launched Baksh Foundation and Baksh Energy as two institutions working on microfinance and working on access to energy. And Baksh Energy was a project which was working on renewable energy in public and private spaces. Women empowerment was not the first thing that we tapped to target, and it was not a project that we envisioned to solve the question of women economic empowerment. But when we actually went to those off-grid villages, when we went to all those thousands of off-grid villages in Punjab and in KP, where we realized that they had no access to energy, they had never seen a light, koi batti nahi thi, there was no grid in those villages, we launched this whole project of solar electrification for them, whereby within our field-based exercises, we realized that it would make the most economic sense for us to employ the women from those villages to become our energy entrepreneurs. So it was, you understand my point? It was not a question कि भाई औरतों को empower करना है तो women entrepreneurs बना लो. It was more of a question that who is going to be that right agent of change in that village who will enable us to identify all those solutions that we want, because we didn't just want access to energy. We didn't just want economic activity. We wanted the girls to go to school. We wanted health to be impacted. We wanted living standards to be bettered. We wanted the general quality of life for those villages to be bettered. And we realized this through field experience by actually engaging with real people, that it is the woman who will become those agents of change. And that's why the women became my Roshna Bibis, and those women became my light ladies, and they became the nucleus of the entire project Lighting a Million Lives of Baksh Foundation, which later became an internationally certified practice that embodies access to energy and gender equality's nexus in one project. And hence it became an internationally certified project, now being implemented in Uganda, in India, and in Bangladesh. So for me, women economic empowerment was sort of a destiny that came out naturally, and it evolved in development solutions that I was working towards. So it wasn't the real solution I was working towards, but I've realized it through experience that it is an inevitable part of every development solution that you foresee. So working as the CEO of Baksh Foundation, I thought that it is the civil society that is responsible for actually achieving the solution to women's economic empowerment, the NGOs, the people working in the field, the people working with the real woman in the field, the Roshla Bibi. However, that theory kind of changed in 10 years when I got on this UN high-level panel for women economic empowerment, which has global leadership on the panel, and thereby the entire spectrum of women economic empowerment just widened by 100 times for me, because I realized that problem to itna hai nahi. Problem is much wider and broader than we would have envisioned. And we realized on that panel that the challenge of women economic empowerment is a very complex global problem with multiple dimensions to it, which requires multiple stakeholders to come together in a sort of a matrix of solutions. So there's no one solution that fits all. There's no one sector that is responsible. It's not just the governments. It's not just the private sector. It's not just the civil society. It's not just the informal workers or the formal workers. There was a whole broad nexus that had to be resolved to identify the real solutions towards women economic empowerment. Now, this global panel is working on the strategy to achieve global women economic empowerment for 189 UN member states. And while we were discussing global strategies on identifying the formal workers, mein kya ho sakta hai, informal mein, agriculture mein, women-owned enterprises mein, in engaging with a few of the most powerful women from around the world, Christine Lagarde, the managing director of IMF, she's on the panel with me, and in having a one-on-one conversation with her, she's been twice on the Forbes list of the most powerful women. She was the second most powerful woman on the Forbes list, and has been listed, I think, twice or thrice in the top 50. So certainly a most powerful woman. But when you hear her story out, you realize that women economic empowerment for all of us as individual women is a challenge that we face every day. Christine Lagarde, being the IMF managing director, the most powerful force you see in the financial institutions, this is top gun. She, when you hear her personal accounts, you get to realize the challenges that she has encountered as a woman herself towards this fight of women economic empowerment. Similarly with the other leaders that I met who we think are, been there, done that. But that made me think that, while this whole global strategy is evolving, where all these global leaders are sitting together to define what the UN member countries will do till 2030 to achieve the agenda of gender equality for all and the planet 50-50, each one of us sitting on that table have our own fight to go through every single day, being a woman, right? And that is, I realized at some point there, that is the reality of women economic empowerment. While the issue of women economic empowerment is a very complex mix, which requires stakeholders from the public sector, from the private sector, support from academia, from the civil society to go down in the field, because we are talking about 50% of this world's population. The real solution for that fight beholds at the level of the individual. Each single woman who is in any position, wherever she is, in any of these departments, in any of these stakeholder in consortiums, or in any level of society she's at. Because until and unless that woman there decides to sort of take up this fight at her own individual level, she cannot translate that for other women in the society. Now that I'm representing this task force for the Chief Minister Punjab and heading a task force on women economic empowerment, I have recently gotten to know the good work the Punjab government is doing for women economic empowerment. And my role as the chairperson is primarily to collectivize this good work and showcase it on international platforms that I have an association with. And believe me, I had the honor of representing the Punjab Call for Action report in March 2017 to the new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in New York. And Punjab was highlighted as one of the top 5 case studies of states of political leadership which has been galvanized to work towards the agenda of women economic empowerment effectively. And this is because of the club of all the initiatives Fawzia talked about, the work the Women Development Department is doing, the CM's SMU unit is doing. And we had invitations from the UK government to come and share the success story of Punjab to the UK MPs and to engage with them to showcase what good work Punjab is doing so the British government could learn from them on the agenda of women economic empowerment. So that gives me great pleasure to be able to be part of this great movement and this great movement happening within the government towards the role. But I feel, like Kate just presented, this is one small agenda, mobility. There are many issues. And when I'm sitting at the high-level panel, I don't want to bore you with those policies, and I'm happy to talk about them later on or share the reports with you. But there's so much on the table. We're talking about a whole set of problems on the informal economy level. We're talking about a whole set of different problems on the formal economy level. We're talking about a completely different tangent on the woman-owned enterprises and an absolutely different tangent on the agriculture-based employed woman, which is 80% of the task force. Now, that's a huge equation, and there are a lot of problems, because when you talk about economic empowerment, it is embedded within political empowerment, it is embedded within social empowerment and legal empowerment. So it's not just economic empowerment. All the three angles tap it from one point and the other. So when I sort of sit back and realize and think through it, that, you know, like the problem is so huge, how are we going to solve it? The only solution, one way is to, of course, sit back and say the governments need to do it, so it's your job. They're not doing it, or the private sector needs to do it, it's your job, or the civil society needs to do it, or, you know, academia needs to come up with better research. For me, that's more of a blame game here. For me, I feel, and I like to share this notion with as many people as I can, that it is the responsibility and the onus on each one of us as an individual to take up the ownership of women economic empowerment to actually achieve the results. Because the problem is huge, it's a huge complex matrix, as I said, and the solutions are numerous, which can arise on an individual level, or the state level, or the private sector level. And there are solutions that need to be achieved on every level to make it come together in that collective whole. Now, Punjab is already doing great work on different angles, but when we club that together, the UK government wants to learn from us. There are other state governments who are approaching us already. Sharjah came in for a delegation. That's the onus when people come together. So I just like to, for me, at the end of all of this different experience, from having worked in the civil society, from being representing Pakistan at a UN high-level panel amongst global leadership of women, to now being in the Punjab government as the Chief Minister's Task Force chairperson, at the end of the day, I feel that it is the role of each one of us as an individual, male or female, to take on the onus of women economic empowerment, and just to reflect that within your position, whether you are in academics, whether you own a company, whether you work in a company, whether you're in the government, what little or big role can you play in your individual capacity to sort of put in a drop in that ocean that is required to be formed. So, I'll just make it short, leave it to that thought, and let you guys ask as many questions as you want. But this is sort of the akhaz of my years of very diverse experience in the different hats I wear. And that's what I'm now looking to do. I'm working still with the development sector, advising them on gender, with the World Banks and UNDPs. They have their own role with the government and with the UN. And happy to talk to any individual as well, because I think it's something that we all need to club together to actually achieve the real solution. So, yeah, thank you.
And now we have around 15 to 20 minutes for the Q&A discussion session. So what we'll do is we'll take 3 questions at one time, and those who ask the question, please do introduce yourselves. Okay, so wait for the first one. Ji.
Hello, I am Saheem. I am honored to be here. I work with Kate for the last 3 years. I have questions for Kate. We get so little time when we are working with each other, we get so little time. So I guess it's a better time to ask questions to Kate.
Okay.
So when you go in the field and ask people whether you would like to work or not, specifically women, all of them, of course, say, yes, I would like to work. Trust me, it's my personal opinion. Everyone within the village, whether they are women or men, would say the same thing, that they would like to work. Trust me, but at the same time, they are working. They are not unemployed. We have to define how we define the, how we define whether you are working or not. Yeah. I myself come from a very small village in Kasur. I guess it is quite possible to live within your house in a city like Lahore. It is just not possible to live within your house, not go outside your house. It is not possible at all when you are living in your village, in a small village, because facilities are not just available in the house. You have to For instance, if there is no sanitation system, there is no other facilities available within the house. Every household member, whether they are males or females, have to go outside home. They have to engage in work outside home. So the question comes back to how, I guess, we define whether someone is working or not. And another experience, people tend to drop their spouses and siblings to workplace because of the mobility issues and the harassment they face on the transport, while on the transport. But I have a funny funny experience that people tend to accompany them more while women are closer to their own houses and localities. But for instance, to the bus stop. But once they are boarded, no matter how far the workplace is, women are on their own. So perhaps harassment and cases like that happens more closer to where you live. I'm not very sure. I do not have data to back this up, but this is my own judgment and my own story.
Okay, thank you very much. Could we have another two? So we can have two more questions. Yeah.
My name is Saima Muzaffar and I'm working as senior coordinator at Comsets University, Lahore. My question is that, I have listened to the discussion, very valuable discussion from you people, but why? Why female bosses are stricter than male bosses? Why female bosses are more problematic? This is the fact, and I have faced it by myself, and why male bosses are more helpful and they are your rescuer. This is the fact. And one more thing is that the main power behind every educated and working woman is her family, her father, her mother, and her husband. If these three people are with her, she can cross every barrier. She can cross every barrier if these three people are with her, her husband, father, and mother. But usually we have seen that these three closest relatives are not helping women. They are not cooperating with them. That's why when most of the successful ladies or who have very strong careers, they are single, they are unmarried or divorced. This is a dilemma. This is a very tragic story, and I think that society, the closest relative of a woman, father, mother, and husband,
Could
they
we have the
should be.
question?
So I just want to say that how to change that mindset of father, mother, and women. That she has the right to do the job. She is intelligent. She has the right to study, to be educated, and how to tackle all this problem. How to change the mindset, how to be supportive and helpful for the intelligent girls. So these are the two questions.
You got the gist of it. I think Dr. Saab has a question.
Thank you. Well, this is related to the first question. I was just wondering that the future of work and workplace, as we know, is changing. I know some men who are home-based workers. All they have is their laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, and they're doing quite well. So the concept of home-based workers need to be explored a bit more. That is my question. And if I did not introduce myself, I am Parvez Tahir, and I am happily married to an economist.
Thank you very much. So the first question is for Kate, and the other two, anyone can answer those. So Kate, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think there's sort of two pieces to the first question. One is about sort of response bias in terms of how people respond based on how they perceive the person asking the question. And I think that's always an issue with survey data. And it's something we think about a lot. One thing we can do is improve the way that we ask questions. So I think the Pakistan Time Use Survey is a really great, I didn't show any data from that, but we've done some nice descriptives from it that give a much better sense of like how people actually use their time. So it's not just, okay, are you employed or not employed, but what did you do? So in the time use survey, for example, they ask for the last one day, 24 hours, what did you do from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., et cetera. And that gives you a much better measurement of economic activity and other kinds of activity. And I think there's a lot of insight that can come from that. I know the survey that PCSW is ready to do later in this year to get to sort of focus on different aspects of women's empowerment. They've been thinking very carefully about measurement issues and how to capture some of those things. So I think some surveys are better than others in terms of capturing that issue. But I think what we definitely do say, and okay, yeah, I think as far as, you know, whether people say that when they say that, okay, yes, I want to work, whether they really mean that or not, I agree. I think that's an issue, and we were just discussing this in the survey preparation meeting, that depending on how you ask that question, you get very different answers. So I think if they use the word, people were pointing out that if they use the word nokri, people are much more likely to say yes. If you say kam, they're much more likely to say no, because the perception around what does that really imply, like the whole package, is very different. So these are limitations of survey data, but that's exactly why, you know, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this second phase of the research, because in that we'll see when we change the situation, when we open up new opportunities for transport to people, do they actually then go and take up a job? Well, first, do they apply, which we'll have a very good measurement of, and secondly, do they actually end up going and taking up a job? So that, I think, is one of the reasons why that will give us a more sort of solid piece of evidence. As far as why is it that family members drop off their, male family members tend to drop off their female family members close to home, but then leave them to ride on the bus? I think this is exactly the sort of thing we're thinking, that even women who do participate in the workforce are constrained by transport, because some of them will only take a job if it's in a time and place that the husband or father or brother can drop them all the way to the door. That's a constraint for some people. And so that really affects what kinds of job opportunities you have. That means instead of having the whole city to look in, you have a much smaller area. Others will do exactly what you said, which is that somebody will accompany them up to the stop and then get on. But I don't think it's because harassment is more likely closer to home. I think it's just that they're trying to implement like a partial solution to a problem that is going to be faced throughout. So that means that, okay, I think I'll be okay up until the point that I get onto the bus, and then I take the bus ride. Then when I get off at the other end, it can be an issue. And when I come back to the bus in the evening, it's also going to be an issue. But at least I've solved like part of the problem. I don't think it's that it's more likely to happen closer to home. That's my impression from what I know. And that, again, sort of reinforces, I think, why these are just sort of things that people do to adapt to a not a very good situation, and we should be thinking about much more robust ways that they can be independently mobile if that's what they choose to do. Yeah.
Great. The second one, the mindset one.
Why are women bosses me?
Fair enough. Yeah, so on the mindset one, I just feel that, pehla question on the bosses, right? So why do women bosses are more cruel, or they come out to be? Again, I'm going to talk from my personal example, might be right, might be wrong. But I feel that a woman, it's a learning curve. And initially, a woman, especially when they're working in very male-dominated environments, they need to act with a special seriousness and with a special attitude to just make themselves be more seriously taken. I used to do that because I was working in very male-dominated societies, industries of energy, and I used to walk into a room with 500 men. So I wouldn't laugh, I wouldn't like crack a joke, you know, I would try to be very serious, because of course you need to embody that seriousness, you're a very, very strong, expert professional. That doesn't necessarily say you're like that, but it's just a learning curve, and once you're over those initial phases, you learn that you can be yourself, yet not be questioned on your competence.
Being a woman boss can understand the problem of her subordinate women.
Let's not have a to and fro, so let her answer the question.
Okay. No, I'm just going to share. So initially as well, when I was the CEO of Baksh Foundation, we had to get an exemption to come on board as the youngest CEO for a microfinance institution. And whenever I would go to such forums or anything, I would make sure that I wear a black coat or a gray coat, you know, just to look older and just look more serious, and like, you know, I'm not a funny girl, I'm a very serious professional. And then I was actually advised, and this is true, I was actually advised by this very dear friend of mine, Tina Fordham, who's a global city managing director and a very senior woman. And she advised me that, you know, you're beyond that phase now. And this was 2 years ago. And she told me that, Fiza, you can now wear your pinks and your yellows and your whites and be a woman that you are, because everybody knows the professional that you are. So stop trying to act like a man or be like, to show your professionalism or your seriousness. तो ये मेरा ख्याल है and she shared her story, which was also similar. So I think it's a learning curve, and I do hear these stories that male bosses, female bosses are worse than male bosses, but I think it's a learning curve, and they grow out of it once they get more secure with their professional environment.
But I just want to say that women boss should understand the problems, difficulties, miseries faced by subordinate women, and she should, she is more aware of all those dilemmas, all those problems.
They should empathize.
They should empathize more, yes.
That's why male bosses are more supportive. You can say they are better than.
Could I just jump in on this really quickly? Sorry. I just also want to point out that there's a really big body of research now, I think, that pretty clearly shows that women in the workplace get penalized a lot in terms of perception when they're tough. So when a man is equally tough, he's perceived as being he's acting appropriately as a boss. When a woman is tough, people say, they'll say rude things about her, right? So they'll say that, why is she so mean? Why is she so rude? And there's, I think all of us, women included, tend to have these implicit biases that we're often not aware of in terms of how we perceive people differently. Even if you, as I do, consider myself a very strong feminist, you often find, and if there are kind of psychological tools like implicit association tests, you can take the test online to see what kinds of biases you may have when you're in your perceptions. Even as a strong feminist, I've taken the test and see that I have these kinds of biases, at least to some extent myself. So I think that's something also that we should be keeping in mind, that maybe we should think twice also a little bit. Any individual's results may vary, but also systematically we do see that women are penalized a lot more when they exert their authority, and we should think carefully about that. Also, I would just like to say I've had like 4 women bosses, and they've all been fantastic.
I think I want to add too much on to this discussion, but there is a phenomenon called internalized sexism, where you grow up with certain notions of how women should behave, how men should behave, and when you're given those positions of power, then you know that you are supposed to behave in a certain way as a boss, which is a male domain, basically, and I think Fiza has also spoken about it. I just want to share just a resource with you all, that recently a women's safety application, smartphone application has been launched. And I don't know how many of you have downloaded it. It's PSCA, Punjab Safe Cities Authority. And that has a particular, a specific button. It's the women's safety button. And if you click on it, you can access the police directly, immediately. So there's 1-5 where you can access the police. You can also do a perception survey and submit it online, which will give the Commission is going to analyze it, so which will give us with data on how women feel in a particular phase, how safe they feel. And why do they, if they feel unsafe, why is it that they are feeling unsafe? Is it because there's not enough lighting? Is it because there are not enough people over there? Is it because there are more men and very little women over there? Is it just because there isn't police anywhere nearby, so if they feel harassed, there's no one to report to? So if more and more of you download that app and use it, well, you probably all come from backgrounds where you'll probably not have to stand on a bus stop, but pass it on to others also. That will help us with advocating for better services. More street lighting, more dolphin force going around you. And perhaps some experiences also, because I know that the dolphin force is not perfect right now. Neither is 1-5 at the moment. They have their own issues in terms of how they deal with harassment of women also, but at least we'll have some data to begin with, So it's just PSCA, Punjab Safe Cities Authority, PSCA. Please do download that application. Thanks.
Great. Last question was about technology and workplace.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I think this is a really good point. I think it's a very interesting area for development, but I think it's just a very quantitatively still going to be, and still for the foreseeable future in a context like Pakistan, going to be a really small proportion of the total. So, I think we should definitely explore all of these avenues, but I wouldn't think about that as being a substitute for making it easier for women to get out of the home. I'm sure we're probably on the same page about that.
Couple of more questions. One here, one ask and then.
Yeah, I'm Anam. I am part of the capacity building and training team at SERP, where Kate is also conducting her research. I guess I want to ask maybe a very obvious question also, and I'm sure something that a lot of us were thinking about and is an obvious response to when you think about economic empowerment. To somebody who says, and this may be a peer of mine, somebody from a rural area, an urban area, any young woman who says something like, well, you know, I feel like looking after my kids and raising my kids is at least as important, if not more, than working at XYZ bank, and I feel like that social good has a lot more value and empowers me a lot more. Now that's a question mark statement maybe, but you know, that's more important than me working at a bank, at a farm or whatever. It's also linked to, I think, a point that was raised earlier about how we define work. So is her looking after her kids and her house not work? So there's that question. But I think what I want to ask, and this is more for the two women who are from the government, like what is our government's response to that? So what do you say as a policymaker? Are we saying, yes, we agree, and so in some situations at least, it's okay for you to not be in the workplace, and that's actually very important because somebody has to raise the millions of kids in Pakistan also. If we're not saying that, and if we're saying that actually economic empowerment is super important, then my question is, why are we saying that? Is there evidence to support it? Yeah, I'm interested in the government's position on that, but Kate is also free to chip in if you want.
Hi, my name is Asad Liaquat. I'm a PhD student. I'm based at Urban Ideas this semester. My question is for Fiza Farhan. So in terms of, I was hoping that your talk would be more about what the task force does. In terms of, because I've seen the report of the task force, I've seen sort of some of the initiatives that have been taken, and it seems to be the case that, and I might be mistaken, so it'd be good to hear more from you. It seems to be the case that the Women Development Department has some responsibilities, PCSW has some responsibilities, there's some responsibilities that sort of civil society organizations take up, researchers take up. And it wasn't clear to me that the status with respect to what we're calling women's economic empowerment is at this amazing stage in Punjab or Pakistan, at this stage that we should be sort of really celebrating it, or sort of like celebrating our achievements in that sense, instead of sort of like pinpointing exact areas we need to make a lot more progress in and working sort of more substantively in those areas. So I was wondering sort of what the role of the task force is with respect to working with different departments, and sort of what the exact role the task force plays, and sort of what the commitment from the Punjab government is beyond sort of celebrating achievements.
I'll take the about women working in the house, out of the house, choosing to work, not to work. It is about what does she have the choice to work, and if she chooses to work, are the conditions conducive for her to work? And that is the only thing that the government go drop the sisters off to work also. So it's just about giving her the choice, and the government of course does recognize it. Nobody there is also no assumption that women who stay at home and raise children, their work is in any way less valuable. It's extremely valuable, you know. But does she want to do it? Or it's just a role that has been imposed on her? And why can a man not stay back and take care of the children, whereas the woman, if she chooses, goes out to work, you know? So it's just about that freedom of choice.
One more thing is that I am a mother of two kids, and ये सारी उम्र तो आप अपने बच्चे नहीं ना पैदा करने और पालने, वो तो कुछ 4-5 साल होते हैं, बच्चे बड़े हो जाते हैं, तो बाद में सारी उम्र क्या करना है?
Yes, okay. So yes, on the task force, yeah, so the purpose of the task force, right? The task force it has 3 key roles, and I'll just be very specific about them. The first role is to integrate all the efforts happening in Punjab in the different departments on women economic empowerment, not just the Women Development Department, which is the host department, but labor, health, education, social welfare, P&D, all the efforts happening throughout the departments, Punjab Commission of course, and clubbing them together into one sort of centralized platform. Just say we have monthly meetings of the task force, whereby it's not just bringing all the initiatives on one table, global, but also inter-departmental support happening, whereby one department needs support from the other department to get something done. That all happens together at that platform. So it's an inter-department platform, so to speak. The second very important goal of the task force is for the task force to be an ambassador for the work Punjab is doing to the international platforms. And that's what I do in my capacity as a UN high-level panel member, not just celebrating the work, but actually creating awareness of the work that Punjab is doing to the international audience, to the global audience. Sharing with them what Punjab is doing, making alliances, learning alliances, and connecting the dots. Primarily with global, not just G2G, but on any level. And thirdly, bringing best practices and partnerships from the international arena to Punjab. And bringing partnerships like the Sharjah delegation, which recently came, 2 other are in the pipeline. So bringing best practices or partnership alliances from international governments and international arenas to Punjab for enabling the Punjab government to better work towards women economic empowerment. So these are the 3 main goals of the task force.
We have one question.
Antonio Marastro from LAMS. So my question is related to the fact that I have seen here a lot of attention given to the obstacles that a woman faces if she wants to work outside the family. And one feels that if the struggle continues, especially in urban environments like in Lahore, for example, over time, a lot of success may be achieved because of several reasons, including, better technological opportunities and changing of institutional and legal framework and so on. But Kate showed a slide where it was reported that there is a lot of opposition also in the family to a woman going out and working. And I feel that that is a much stronger obstacle. Eventually, it might be a much stronger and more difficult problem to solve for, women economic empowerment. Because when you say that most times, even if there are opportunities outside, and even if all the problems outside are removed, your male family members will still be in disagreement with you going to work outside, then your problem won't be solved. So I was wondering if there is any way one could devise a policy to change that kind of attitude.
Are we just taking more?
I mean, the physical evidence was presented by Kate, but anybody can answer.
This is a very complex issue to deal with. And I guess one of the solutions would be to review the curriculum and see where is it that patriarchy is coming from, A little bit of an effort has been done to review the curriculum and revise it to talk about women's rights per se, and also talk about violence against women as such. That's the one area that is being worked on. The other thing is that women needing to work is becoming an economic reality. And women are working, increasing number of women are working, whether their families like it or not. And while they might not like it, they still want their women to work, because now it's impossible to survive with one person working in the household. So our economic realities are changing per se. Now it's just about ensuring that we sort of build on that dynamic which is existing. But the patriarchy that you're talking about, it's been around for 1,000 years. It's going to be difficult to change. We can only add to it, and the media is certainly not helping. The media is really stereotyping the roles that women should play, and also that the other woman, etc. So tough one to crack.
Could I add to that? Yeah. Is it on the same point, or?
No, you can add on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. Just harkening back to the earlier question about the people making the choice, I just want to say I agree 110% with everything you said, and that's definitely what motivates the study we're doing. I don't want to give anybody the idea that the study is motivated by just trying to push women. The idea is to give the opportunity if people want it. on the question of opposition within the family, so yeah, I think this is a very complex issue, but first, I would say there's clearly an interaction between the two things. So part of the reason that there's opposition within the family is because of the situation outside the home. Like, I think that that graph that I showed where we saw that, you know, there are a lot of men who don't support the women and their families traveling if it's on a rickshaw or a wagon, but they do if it's on a women's only wagon. What we see is that, to me that suggests it's not universal, but it's suggestive that for some people, the reason that they're saying, I don't want you to work outside, is because they don't want their female family members to go into an unsafe environment. That is the transport, which we're working on, that's also within the workplace, harassment in the workplace, and it's all of the social stigma that comes along with all of those things. So I'm not saying that it's only because of that, but there is that interaction, which suggests that the attitudes may be shifted in part by making the environment, by changing the environment. So they're not sort of two independent pieces. But there are a lot of things, I think, there's sort of a whole range of different things that can be explored in terms of directly shifting those attitudes as well. So I think one that I think is really promising is thinking about where do we see female role models in our society. And so you mentioned the media. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of do some experimentation around the inclusion of more positive female role models in the media. That would be a really interesting thing to test out. There's good evidence, I think, now from local government participation in India suggesting that when you require that women go into the public space, like when you, for example, set a minimum quota on the number of women in local government, as Pakistan also did. That can have an effect in terms of changing people's attitudes. So I think there's a whole menu of different things we can think about. Many of them will have, potentially small effects relative to kind of the size of the problem, but we should be thinking on all of those fronts and tackling it in multiple ways at once.
The last one, and then
just a note of caution for policymakers. I have some experience of policy making. You see, the trouble with our policy making machine is that it is essentially sectorally designed. Anything multi-sectoral or cross-sectoral, and it fails. And when there is a lot of pressure, they create another window, like Women Department, like Environment Department, for anything multi-sectoral. But you will see these departments have very small budgets. And the budget of the activities related to them is in the main department. Like if you want to do something for rural women, well, agriculture department will have all the budgets. And you will have hard time convincing them that you have something to say. So there is this problem in our policy making, that the departments are organized as if there is nothing exists across sectors. So we need to be warned about it and do something about that from a governance perspective.
I think, thank you very much. We've run out of time. I think it's been a very valuable and informative session, and a round of applause for our panelists. And now I have a 15-minute lecture on the topic. I'm just kidding. Let's go break for tea and snacks. Hopefully there are tea and snacks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.